Viewers, the crackdown on student protesters has become the biggest political flashpoint following the protests. Now, we've seen, of course, the protests that took place on the 20th of July when the government had given an assurance to the protesters that all FIRs against student protesters would be revoked and no new FIRs would be registered against student protesters. This is what the CJP claimed. But Times now has accessed new videos which once again put the focus on the violence that took place on the 20th of July. Now, in these videos, you see how protesters resorted not only to stone pelting, but also brutally attacked the police officers on multiple occasions amidst these protests. Let's take you through some of the videos that have now been released by the Delhi police that are now under the scanner. Let's quickly go through the first aspect of this. This is, of course, a cop who's being thrashed by protesters seen in this particular video. Another video, of course, of another cop who's been thrashed. This is, of course, on the 20th of July, as per Delhi police sources. Let's take you across to the next aspect of this. Stones pelted at cops. Stone pelting happening. In fact, this particular police officer who's retreating is attacked from behind by one of the protesters who's seen masked in these protests, and some protesters are seen with lathi in their hands as well. Pepper spray used on cops. You can see an object being sprayed from what appears to be a can. And the police official then, of course, apprehending this individual, police started beating him. CJP supporters start making videos to show police brutality. That is, of course, one video as well that has been put out. Police vans that have been vandalized all across Janpat and different parts. We've seen how this particular vehicle, which is a Scorpio vehicle, there's another Bolero vehicle, and all of this appears to be in Connaught. Yes, this is in fact at the outer circle of Connaught Place outside the Pain Balochi restaurant, where the protesters appear to have gone completely violent and at least are seen in this attacking those particular vehicles which were there. All right, and then there is some more breaking news that Times Now has accessed in terms of the proof of how student protests were hijacked. Times Now has accessed these images from the Delhi protests, which have now been released by the Delhi police. And the Delhi police has alleged that 2,873 men with criminal antecedents were present at the protest site between July 20th and July 25th. Now, these criminals have been identified using FRS, and through technical means, police are investigating whether these men were involved in the violence that broke out at Jantar Mantar in and around New Delhi. These criminals are involved in heinous crimes, sexual assault, murder, as well as crime involving minors that they have been involved in. What exactly are we talking about? This is what Delhi police says, that it has proof that the Jantar Mantar protest was hijacked. Let's take you through the evidence that has been identified through FRS. The first accused is an individual called Yash. In fact, these are the dossiers that has as far as this person called Yash is concerned. His details are there. Of course, a photo has been amassed. The claim is that he's identified as one of the protesters. He was named in an earlier FIR. Now, this is, of course, as far as that individual is concerned. Another individual called Mohammad Rubail Sheikh has been identified, who was named in an earlier FIR. And this is, of course, claimed to be around 9/5/2018 that he was accused. He's identified as a Jantar Mantar protester as well. There's also another individual called Sumit Rawat, who was named in an earlier FIR. He's also been identified as a protester at Jantar Mantar. This is what Delhi police says as far as the charges against this individual is concerned. Let's go across to Priyank, who's with us. Priyank, very, very important that the Delhi police is now saying through FRS that they've identified specific individuals and they are saying that they have a criminal history, as many as 2,800 such individuals who they have identified. Priyank.
Yes, Madhav, and that is a reason which appears that because of which the CJP never took onus of this particular protest, although they kept on calling that on 20th they will be marching towards the parliament. But there was no official communication which happened with the Delhi police where they had to sign in writing that every responsibility of any kind of untoward incident will be taken by them. We know that they have managed to politically dominate the system where they have managed to pull down these FIRs. But it was clearly indicating that there was a larger conspiracy to create unrest in the country, to trying to vitiate the atmosphere. The CJP never signed on these documents, although they kept on telling to Delhi police officials that we will be marching. So everything is being analyzed.
Will the assurance be given by the government as the CJP desires, or will there be any breakthrough tomorrow? Those are some very important questions, because the big question is that CJP leader Ashutosh Ranka says Centre had agreed to withdraw every FIR on students for the NEET paper leak protest, but insists that the agitation won't end until the assurance is put on paper. He's given tomorrow's deadline to the union government. Listen in.
जितनी भी एफआईआर्स फाइल की गई हैं उन्हें विड्रॉ किया जाएगा। किसी भी प्रोटेस्टर या ऑर्गेनाइजर को परेशान नहीं किया जाएगा, डिटेन नहीं किया जाएगा, अरेस्ट नहीं किया जाएगा और फ्यूचर में किसी भी प्रोटेस्टर या ऑर्गेनाइजर पर कोई केस नहीं होगा। अगर कल तक ये रिटर्न सरकार की तरफ से नहीं आता है और जितने भी अलग अलग राज्यों में छात्रों को, युवाओं को, प्रोटेस्टर्स को अरेस्ट किया गया है या डिटेन किया गया है, उन्हें रिलीज नहीं किया जाता है, तो कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी फिर से प्रोटेस्ट करने को मजबूर होगी।
Meanwhile, this also comes on a day when, in fact, the Chief Justice of India has come out, and Mr. Suryakant observing the right to peaceful protest is constitutionally protected. He's further said that a mere agitation cannot justify a lathi charge. But questions continue to persist over the police action against protesters. First, we saw students also being thwarted from advancing further with tear gas and batons. However, a video from Bihar Siwan has now even put forth an incident that has, shamed many. In this video, you see a police officer wielding an AK-47 before protesting students.
सर, जिस सिपाही का वीडियो वायरल हो रहा है गोली चलाते वक्त, उस पर कार्रवाई हुई है सर?
जी, उस सिपाही को तत्काल प्रभाव से निलंबित कर दिया गया है एवं उसके विरुद्ध विभागीय कार्रवाई प्रारंभ की गई है।
सर, उनके द्वारा बिना आदेश के गोली चलाया गया था क्या?
जी, उनको आदेश नहीं था। उनको हवाई फायरिंग भी नहीं करनी चाहिए थी और उन्हें इस तरह का शस्त्र वो पब्लिक में ले ही नहीं जाना चाहिए। वो फंस गए थे, जैसे पूर्व में एसपी साहब ने बताया, कहीं और जा रहे थे और इस कमोशन में फंस गए थे।
However, in fact, we've seen how members of parliament, particularly for LJP, have maintained that police will act against criminals involved in the protests, which almost sounded like a justification for AK-47 wielding officers. However, the police officer has now been suspended and others in the NDA maintain that the matter is under investigation. Let's also listen to what the opposition had to say on the same.
कोई सिपाही पे कार्रवाई करना ये अलग विषय है, लेकिन किसके आदेश से कार्रवाई हुई है? क्या एसपी पे कार्रवाई हुई है? जो बिहार के गृह मंत्री हैं, यानी जो मुख्यमंत्री हैं, क्या उनका आदेश था? ये तो मुख्यमंत्री जो सम्राट चौधरी जो हैं खुद ही आपराधिक छवि के हैं, जो पुलिस को भी जो है गुंडा बनाने का काम कर रहे हैं और हम तो इसकी न्यायिक जांच की मांग करते हैं।
ये इन्होंने अभी भी एफआईआर दर्ज की है स्टूडेंट्स के खिलाफ, शायद कल रात को या आज सुबह। pellet guns, AK-47, are these terrorists? What is wrong with these people?
ये कहा कि मुकदमे नहीं लिखे जाएंगे, तो मुकदमे तो लिखे जा रहे हैं। बिहार में देखिए कितने बच्चों को जेल भेज दिया गया। बिहार में AK-47 और हाँ, AK-47 एक की जान चली गई सुनने में आ रहा है, कई लोग घायल हैं। यूपी में इस तरह का कई इंसिडेंट्स हैं, सोशल मीडिया पे लिख देते हैं तो जेल भेज दे रहे हो आप।
Any student protest, any youth protest, if there are people who are criminal background who try to infiltrate and create ruckus, bringing a bad name to such student protest, then the police has to take an action. Police did take an action. Anybody who's from a criminal background who tries to incite violence, who tries to take advantage of it and make a social ruckus over there, will not be acceptable by any police force, and that's why it's called a police force.
सिवान में दोनों तरफ से क्राउड आ गया था। पुलिस के लिए भी एक बड़ा चैलेंज था, जो हम लोग की जानकारी मिली है, लेकिन जो पुलिस वाला ये करते हुए फुटेज में दिखा है, उसके बाद बिहार पुलिस ने उस पर एक्शन लेके उनको सस्पेंड कर दिया है।
Joining us now for more on this is Saurav Das, who's the chief spokesperson of the Cockroach Jantar Party. Saurav, thank you so much for speaking to Times Now. Now, the Cockroach Jantar Party has had a successful movement. The government has blinked, the ministers resigned. The protest has, of course, been called off. What is it, according to you, that still remains to be desired or achieved?
See, the other two guarantees of the government. Number one, that all the FIRs that have been registered have to be withdrawn. And that a written guarantee ought to come from the government that no future action will be taken against any of the protesters, and no retaliatory action will also be taken against any of them. So that written guarantee and withdrawal is still pending. And number two, the compensation. The compensation to the families of the dead NEET victims, that is also pending.
But the question is, I actually went to Parliament today and spoke to somebody pretty senior in the government who's privy to the talks that you all had, ahead of your announcement on Saturday. And they said that the assurance that was given to the CJP was that peaceful protesters would not be targeted or there would be no legal cases. So I think that's a distinction that the government is seeking to draw between those who have protested peacefully vis-a-vis those who have acted or engaged in some kind of violence. What was the assurance you were given? Was it an omnibus blanket assurance of all FIRs being quashed?
Absolutely. I don't think it's proper for anybody in the government, especially someone who's privy to the talks, to be misleading journalists in this manner. What was, see, the word peaceful did come up during the conversation, but we were very wary of using that terminology, because what the government and the police would then do is to term anyone they dislike as a non-peaceful protester and frame them in some case or the other. So we made it very categorically clear to the ministers, and therefore you would see that kind of language reflected in the agreement talks and during the press conference, that protesters will not be proceeded against and FIRs against them will be withdrawn. So if you just pull up that clip from the press conference with the two ministers and me and Ashutosh, you will see that a peaceful word wasn't used. It was only protesters.
Okay, but you acknowledge that was a statement from the government side. But let me ask you a simple question. Shouldn't there be a distinction made between those who protested peacefully, as is their democratic right, and those who've created a ruckus, who can be seen, for instance, beating up policemen? In fact, Delhi police has put out several such videos this evening as well. Do you believe that FIRs against such people who've attacked cops can also be withdrawn?
See, right now, what has been agreed upon is that all FIRs need to be withdrawn. We don't want to give that, wiggle room to the police to do as they please and brand whoever they dislike as a non-peaceful protester. It's dangerous, it's risky, and it does not serve any purpose at all then when it comes to this kind of guarantee. Therefore, all FIRs need to be withdrawn, and assurance needs to be given that no protester will be proceeded against even in the future. Coming to the point of, violent ones, of course, there's no space for violence in any kind of protest, especially our protests. And therefore, I am sure one can differentiate between a hardened criminal and, protesters who are just agitated during the protest. We had intelligence inputs, and we had, even preempted several of those attacks from antisocial elements. However, the police cannot be trusted. There's a lot of trust deficit when it comes to, police, especially after the kind of brutality we saw from their side on 20th July. How they blinded people using pellet guns, how they broke skulls, how they broke legs, and molested women, etc., etc.
But that's exactly the point. The exact point, Saurav, is this: that if they've used pellet guns, if they've used AK-47s in Bihar, you will want them to be prosecuted. So the same yardstick that is being used against the police has to be used by those who are taking law into their own hands. You may not trust the police, but if there is video evidence suggesting that people are engaging in mass violence, if they are targeting cops, then obviously the law must apply uniformly, whether it's to police or to violent protesters.
See, for all of this to happen, material needs to come through. We need to be shown what is the FIR. We haven't still received the copies of the FIR that were promised. So we need to see the copies of the FIR. We need to see on what material are they calling someone non-peaceful protester. For instance, if somebody was wearing a mask and pelting stones, what is the guarantee that they would say that was Saurav Das and not someone else, and just try to frame me? So we need to think about these circumstances, because the police will definitely do this.
Obviously, it will have to follow the legal process. I'm sure the FIRs will be filed. They put out several videos today. I'm sure you've seen the videos you've just put out as well on the channel. But there's a reason I'm asking you this. I don't know if you've forgotten, but Times Now's reporter Dev Kotak, who you had called to speak to, was assaulted while he was just making his way to you. Surely you don't think that the FIR registered on his behalf must be withdrawn?
No. That is what I'm saying. So it has to be based on solid material. It cannot be based on, what if the police just one day wakes up and says that this person was a non-peaceful protester. So there's absolutely no place for violence for sure. At the same time, we must be very wary of the kind of wiggle room that we allow the police, because then that will be used to, that will be weaponized against peaceful protesters as well.
No, of course, if there are peaceful protesters who are being unnecessarily targeted, that's a different story. But let me just read out what the police has told us today. The police has alleged that 2,873 men with criminal antecedents were present at the protest site between January 20th to January 25th. And they have said that this includes 101 involved in murder, 62 in attempt to murder, 284 in dacoity or robbery, 61 in rape, 6 offences under the POCSO Act, 25 in molestation, 229 in offences under the Arms Act, 135 in snatching, 19 in kidnapping, and 67 in narcotics NDPS related offences. What would you say? Because 2,800 is a huge number.
See, I would only say that all this needs to be checked even by our legal team. We'll need to see the material based on which the police is branding someone non-peaceful protester and proceeding against them. Because, people have come to the protest, with good faith and intention. We cannot be using some of these, criminals who arrived at that location to be targeting other peaceful protesters. We have to be very careful about that. So we've been very clear that all the FIRs need to be withdrawn until the 25th, and that was the agreement that was reached upon. I don't think the government should be dishonoring whatever was decided and declared before the youth of this country through that press conference on Saturday, because that would send a very, very wrong signal. And Madhav, at the same time, I should tell you that using the facial recognition technology that they are taking so much pride in, they're actually locating, they're making files on every single protester, even peaceful protesters, and reaching to their houses, threatening their parents. They are reaching coaching centers and, asking them to identify students. All of this kind of ground level thing is happening, and the police is doing it. So
why don't you expose them? I'm sure those protesters will be willing to come out and speak. Your protesters have been very vocal. They're very articulate. Have you put out those examples perhaps on social media?
I would just request you to not put disproportionate burden on the protesters. We've just had a major victory after 37 days of struggle.
No, I'm saying if the police is misusing its powers, surely you can expose them. Forget the protesters, you can do it, or some of your colleagues can do it.
Exposing them continuously, and therefore we are very, very wary of giving them, so much wiggle room that they will, ultimately use their space to get any peaceful protester into their arms.
Yeah, but you're asking for a written guarantee by Tuesday. So are you now threatening to hold this a government, and as far as the peace, the law and order and other issues are concerned, hostage for this cause? Because I saw Ashutosh's tweet this evening where he's saying that we will once again sit on dharna.
See, it's not about threatening. It is about the honor that is associated with the word given by the two senior ministers of this government, because they were speaking on behalf of the government of India, and surely their words do hold meaning, right? If they have committed before the nation, before the young of this country, that all FIRs will be withdrawn and that no action will be taken against anyone who has been associated with this protest, then surely they have to honor this word that they have given. If they had any reservations, they should have discussed this during the 3 rounds of talks that we had. But for them to come back now through the press, through the police, and say all of these things, it's dishonorable, it is unacceptable, and the young of this country will not accept it. And hence we have declared that if the government does not honor its word by tomorrow, then we will give a big call for Delhi. We will resume the protest. And then, I don't know what kind of talks are going to work, because talks are based on a foundation of trust. And the government is increasingly breaking this trust by doing all of this.
Right. But let me ask you, now the RAF, which has fired those pellet guns, for instance, they have already started an internal inquiry. And I believe the report will be out in a week or so on the alleged excesses by its personnel, which you are yourself alleging. Do you not think it's important for even amongst your protesters, those who have gone out of hand? See, because no one is questioning the cause of the students. Even the government has in a way agreed because the minister has resigned. Nobody is questioning that. But is it possible that your protest was hijacked by certain lumpen elements, either associated with political parties or those who have a criminal background? Do you think that there is a possibility that those individuals might have hijacked your protest? Because there are a lot of videos also showing it. I'm not denying the fact that police has been high-handed, but shouldn't you also, in that sense, perhaps look into these charges and at least look at which are those individuals who have been spreading that violence?
See, our protest has been the most peaceful protest in a long time, because we were sitting at Jantar Mantar in the heart of Delhi for 36 days straight, you know, no case of violence at all. Of course, there were some antisocial elements from the BJP RSS that infiltrated our protest, and we had that intel. We tried to preempt it, we publicized it, we tweeted about it. All of that happened. However, like I said, initially the police even denied using pellet guns, and now they're finally admitting to it, because there's a lot of pressure both in parliament and outside for them to admit this. So that's what I'm saying, that police cannot be trusted in the manner you are asking us to trust them. Today, if we put caveats and give the police wiggle room to say, you know, you identify who is a peaceful protester or not, if it comes to them, then they will declare 90% of the crowd violent, and then everybody is gonna be unnecessarily harassed and targeted. And that is our precise concern. And therefore, you know, we've made it very clear, even during the talks, that all FIRs have to go, and not just in Delhi, but across India, wherever the BJP and NDA parties are ruling.
No, but that's fine. You've called for the FIRs to be withdrawn, but the point is this, Saurav. Ultimately, violence has happened. The protesters were called by the CJP for the Sansad Chalo. You know, somewhere you have to owe the responsibility if people have gone out of hand. Of course, if police has been high-handed, they have to be acted against. But those who have, you've not been able to control, surely you can't set a legal precedent where those individuals are given a free run.
No, that's what I'm saying. The material has to be shown. Let them show us the material. They say that they are profiling individuals. Let us see those profiles.
But
now, what is happening?
The judge, will you sit in judgment, or will the judge and the legal system be sitting in judgment? Now, this is something completely new thing that you're suggesting.
Let the lawyers look into it. I'm not saying that I'm going to look into it. I'm saying there's a legal team. Let them look into it. Let them, you know, an alternative can be suggested. For instance, an independent judicial commission can be set up to look into the police atrocities and any retaliation that might have happened from the protester side. But
so this is a new demand. You're saying there should be an independent judicial commission.
It's an alternative that the government can explore. It has the powers to explore it. However, any such, you know, judicial commission should inspire confidence in the hearts of the protesters. It should be fair, it should be independent, not one of those, you know, rubber stamp commissions that this government is expert in making.
But
so
all those assumptions, Saurav, the trouble is, all these assumptions, who is going to satisfy you? At what point of time will you say, no, this is right or this is wrong? Now, you want a credible commission.
To satisfy people is the job of the government. It is not for you or me to be concerned about it. It is the government that has to serve at the pleasure of the people of this country, and the people have to be satisfied, and they have to be inspired in confidence on the government's action. So it is for the government to think this.
All right, let's leave it there. At the end of the day, remember that the police also had a very tough job. There were protesters who were jumping over barricades.
Absolutely.
There are videos of them. And if they had entered parliament, God knows what chaos would have happened. So that is also something one has to respect. That's the only reason.
Sympathies for the police. However, do remember that July 20th, the kind of police brutality we saw, we cannot unsee it ever. We cannot ever forget about it.
All right. But Saurav, what if the police had allowed them to go into parliament? What would have happened?
Nobody was going to the parliament.
Because Sansad Chalo was the literal cause.
No, the peaceful march was ongoing. The people would have just stood outside the barricade wherever the police stopped, but the police removed the barricades and started violently lathi charging and tried to cause a stampede-like situation. The girl who is in ICU at RML hospital, just take out the CCTV footage from the police and you'll see how the police removed the barricades that day and started violently thrashing people, because of which she fell and it created a stampede-like situation, and because of which she was, you know, almost on deathbed.
All right. Your version is that the police has done excesses. The police says that it's the protesters who broke the barricades.
The CCTV footages show it.
Okay. No, you're entitled, of course, to your opinion and your views according to what you've seen. But there are other points of view as well. That's the only reason I'm mentioning it. But nevertheless, Saurav Das, all eyes on what will happen tomorrow. As you're, of course, saying that CJP will take a call on whether to call for another protest or not. So all eyes on what the government decides and announces tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, Saurav.